And while we don't know what Wyden's plans are, I know there are people that are going to come up and hopefully give us some specifics on what we do know. But I know, having talked to Wyden's aide, that they plan on doing what I call the Norm and Jerry clear cuts. And they plan on mandating a much larger volume harvest off of BLM lands. That precedent alone, mandating a volume harvest through law, will destroy our land. And so it is really critical to talk to both Wyden before he gets something out, and to talk to DeFazio and reinforce the newspaper opinion articles anytime you get. So I'd like to invite at this time Christina Hubbard of the Forest Web to come up and speak.
Oh good, my notes are upside down. Hi, I'm Christina Hubbard. I'm the project director for Forest Web of Cottage Grove. We came down today to show solidarity with what's going on here in Douglas County. I want to thank you all for coming out today. And I want to speak to you about an issue which we're here for today, which is an ongoing source of concern for all of us that work in the forest conservation issues in Oregon, the ONC lands. As many of you already know, the ONC lands are made up of 2.4 million acres of federal timberlands managed by the BLM. They are spread in a checkerboard pattern of 1 square mile parcels across 18 Oregon counties, and they also play a vital role in the connecting corridors for the forests of the Cascade and the coastal ranges, part of one of the richest carbon sinks in the world. Since 1994, these forests have been managed under the Northwest Forest Plan with federal protections for endangered species, critical habitat, clean water, recreation, and of course, timber harvest to help supplement county revenues. In 2007, Forest Web became involved with a grassroots campaign in Cottage Grove to preserve the ONC lands and stop the Western Oregon Plan Revision, or WOPR. The plan was established to settle a lawsuit during the Bush administration and would have stripped away federal environmental protection to increase logging in these forests. WOPR finally failed as it didn't meet federal environmental standards for clean air and water or endangered species. Unfortunately, those behind the lawsuit have not given up on a way of finding a way around federal regulations to be able to clear cut our public forests. Since WOPR, the protections of these forests have been under constant siege by Oregon's elected officials and the timber industry. In 2011, Congressman DeFazio announced his plan to increase timber revenues by cutting the baby in half, so to speak. Along with fellow Oregon Representatives Wyden and Schrader, he introduced the ONC Trust Conservation in Congress. This plan would remove up to 70% of the ONC forests from BLM management and place them into a timber trust to be managed as private timberlands under Oregon forest practices. When the plan was originally introduced and dismissed as too green by the House Natural Resources Committee and its chairman, Doc Hastings, Congressman Schrader removed all the wilderness protection from the bill and attempted to add it to the Farm Bill as a stealth rider. Fortunately, this tactic also failed. The next effort followed early in 2012 when the Oregon State Legislature passed Senate Joint Memorial 201, a letter to the President and Congress demanding the ONC lands be turned over to the ONC counties to be managed by the private timber industry. And last winter, Governor Kitzhaber convened a closed-door timber harvest panel to work on recommendations for new legislation with the stated purpose of increasing timber harvest. Though the panel could not reach a consensus, the governor sent a letter to Oregon senators and congressional representatives criticizing the Northwest Forest Plan for not generating enough timber and advocating for the same destructive forest policies of the WOPR and DeFazio's ONC plan. And now, DeFazio's ONC Act has reemerged yet again as part of Doc Hastings' deceptively titled H.R. 1526, and you're going to love this title, the Restoring Healthy Forests for Healthy Communities Act. We also have Senator Wyden working on the legislation right now that was discussed a little earlier. And though not as drastic as the DeFazio plan, it will still call for increased logging in our ONC forests using variable retention harvests, which are nothing more than clear cuts with small aggregates of trees, a cosmetic solution similar to putting lipstick on a pig.
Yeah.
So why are these small parcels of forest so important? The commissioners of the ONC counties point to the financial crisis they face and maintain we must log these forests to pay for schools and public safety. Creating jobs is another concern touted by both Congressman DeFazio and Senator Wyden, all for the public good. But it does seem strange that the public has had so little voice in this matter. Closed-door sessions, stealth riders, no public hearings, and no public comment periods. And for the public good, shouldn't our elected officials also look at the potential harm caused by increased logging, such as the exposure of rural residents to toxic chemicals from aerial spraying of herbicides after clear cuts, or the vital role these forests play in the health of our watersheds? Without federal environmental laws to regulate water quality and stream protections, the drinking water which originates in the ONC lands for the citizens of Roseburg, Eugene, Cottage Grove, and many other Oregon communities would be compromised. Yet every action I have mentioned here would exempt these forests from these protections. The result of our elected officials' efforts for the public good would be decreased stream buffers, higher water temperatures, and increased sediment loads and runoff, causing degradation to critical fish habitat and the water quality of our creeks and rivers. And so again, I raise the question, why are these small forests so important in the larger scheme of things? At meetings I've attended of both the Association of ONC Counties and Oregon Forest Resources Institute, I have heard criticism not only of the BLM management, but also of the U.S. Forest Service, suggesting that all of these lands should be turned over for management under Oregon forest practices. Now, with the new focus from the federal government on the increased dangers of wildfires due to climate change, they maintain these forests must be logged to decrease the danger. A danger created more by logging diverse, healthy forests and replacing them with tree plantations that are more susceptible to disease and insect infestation, which puts them at greater risk to fires than climate change does. An article in Science Daily from 2009 reported that the forests of the Pacific Northwest hold significant potential to increase carbon storage and help mitigate greenhouse gas emissions in the coming years, if they are managed primarily for that purpose through timber harvest reductions and increased rotation ages. These findings, made by the College of Forestry at the Oregon State University, as a part of the North American Carbon Program, state the following. If forests in this region were managed over hundreds of years to maximize carbon sequestration, the carbon in live and dead biomass could theoretically double in the Coast Range, West and East Cascades Range, and Sierra Nevada, and triple in the Klamath Mountains. This research was supported by the Biological and Environmental Research Terrestrial Carbon Program of the U.S. Department of Energy. But this management style is not the will of our governor, our state legislators, our congressmen and senators, or our county commissioners, and definitely not the will of the timber industry. They craft and support legislation to remove over 1.7 million acres of ONC forests from federal protection and manage them for 20 to 40-year rotations, clear-cutting diverse, mature stands and replacing them with monocrops to be harvested in yet another 20 to 40 years. And if they had the opportunity, they would do the same thing with every public forest in Oregon. We have to stop the war being waged on the ONC lands, to stop these lands from being treated as a commodity to be exploited rather than as an integral part of an ecosystem that includes all the forests in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. Our leaders need to learn from the wisdom of Aldo Leopold. We abuse the land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see the land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. With the loss of so many of our tropical rainforests, the forests of the Pacific Northwest are now acting as the lungs of our planet. Their health and vitality is critical to any effort to mitigate climate change, and we cannot afford to sacrifice even the least among them, not even 1 square mile of ONC checkerboard, to short-sightedness and greed. As Oregonians, our public forests need our involvement and our attention. We need to put our energies into lobbying our elected officials, educating the general public, developing truly sustainable solutions for Oregon's economic problems, and reforming environmental legislation at both the state and federal level. We need to reframe the discussion and reclaim words such as manage and sustainable. We need to the goal of forestry management should not be to grow bigger trees faster, and sustainability should refer only to the health and vitality of a forest, not how many board feet of timber it can produce. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And next, I'm going to ask Frances Etherington to come up and give us some specific information and lots of other background information, I'm sure, on the bills and legislation.
Thank you, Cynthia. Well, you know what makes me mad? It makes me mad that everybody thinks we should increase clear cutting because the counties don't have enough money to fund county services. The whole reason you see this clear cut right here was one of the schemes to increase money to the counties. The whole reason for the DeFazio bill is how to increase money to the counties for county services, for our library, for the sheriff, for our courthouse business, for us. We need to increase clear-cutting federal lands, our public forests, in order to fund the county services. Now, why is that? Why can't we fund our county services like every other county in the nation does? Well, it all started out when we decided in 1937 to give 50% of the timber receipts on BLM land to the counties in lieu of property taxes. Oh yeah, they can't tax federal land. So therefore, we needed to give them 50% of the timber receipts, and in 1937, that was pretty reasonable. That wasn't too bad. But as the value of timber increased throughout the years, the counties and the timber industry became strong allies. The more the timber industry cut, the richer everybody became, the counties and the industries, and they just went to bed together, and they haven't gotten out of bed together, and they are like this. We need to cut to fund county services. When they cut so much of our BLM, our federal lands, that all the critters there that depended on those old trees started to go extinct. The Endangered Species Act kicked in and logging ramped way down in 1994. And the counties were going, well, we can't ramp logging down. What are we going to do for county services? And so our federal government just gave them money. We delinked cutting with the money they got. We just gave them around $115 million a year for all the counties. Douglas County was getting around $25 million a year. All right, so that's called the Secure Rural Schools. And then lately, Congress said, well, wait a minute now. We aren't just going to hand over this money to you. We're going to cut that funding off. Oh my gosh! So now we have to go back and link cutting with county services again. So everybody's got an idea of how to increase cutting, and it's all clear cutting federal lands. The BLM has been doing just fine meeting their timber targets by thinning in these zillions of managed plantations that they have, and they got another 20 years of restoration thinning that they need to do. They've been doing just fine providing logs to the mills, jobs, and the ecosystem services we all need off our public forests. We certainly can't get clean water off private land. You've seen what those clear cuts look like. There is a 0-foot buffer on private land streams, headwater streams, and a stupid little 20-foot no-cut buffer on fish-bearing streams where BLM has a nice, healthy, big riparian buffer. But now that everyone says, oh, we gotta fund county services by increasing clear cutting, so therefore there's a number of schemes out there to do that. Norm and Jerry, this here, they call this, it's called eco-forestry. No joke. They call that eco-forestry right there. So that's one idea. The other one is Wyden has got some principles that he thinks we should incorporate this. He hasn't put forth a hard bill. And then DeFazio has put forth a hard bill that's now in Congress, working its way through, that says we should give half of BLM lands to be managed like private lands. Well, why, and even if we did a clear cut as much as DeFazio bill says we can get, we're only going to get half of that $110 million that the county says that they need off of BLM lands for funding county services. Why don't we fund county services the way every other county in the nation does? It's because the timber industry owns a huge amount of acres in Douglas County. Roseburg Forest Products, Weyerhaeuser, and all these ONC counties, the timber industry owns a huge amount of private land, and they don't pay taxes. Their tax rate on timber industry private land is far, far lower than the tax rate you and I would have to pay on our property. Why don't they pay their fair share of property taxes right up front?
Yeah.
Now, some of their property taxes, these are property taxes that would go to funding the library. Some of them are deferred on timberland until they cut the timber. It's called a severance tax. Well, right now, the big companies are relieved of their severance tax. If you own over 5,000 acres, you don't have to pay that part of your property tax. Not only do you begin with a low rate, but if you're super rich, you pay even less. It's only the small timber owners under 5,000 acres that have to pay their severance tax. That's not fair. All we need to do is fix that, and all these wonderful tree protectors sitting in this tree sit, right there, they're up there trying to protect that land right now from being clear cut. They could come down and we could all live happily ever after with our federal lands providing us with the other ecosystem services that they provide. What do they provide? Christina named it well, carbon sequestration. Scientists have found that our BLM temperate rainforest can sequester more carbon per acre than any other place in the world, including tropical rainforests. Here we have it right in our own backyard. We can help save the world's climate. What do we want to do? Increase clear cutting? Over 1.6 million people in Western Oregon depend on their drinking water directly off of those BLM lands. So we get clean drinking water. And you know what? How many of you here in Roseburg have met people who have moved here recently because it's a beautiful place to live? These forests give us our quality of life. And now with high-speed internet, I've met people who telecommute to LA and live in Roseburg. Well, what cut all these beautiful recreational lands that we go to? We know here in Roseburg, we know how wonderful these lands are to recreate on. We drive around out there, we have fun. Those BLM lands, are our public forests. The timber industry has already clear-cut all their own stuff, hands off our public forests.
Yeah.
And you know, I just want to say one more thing about these taxes that they don't pay. Not only do they not pay those taxes, but the majority of the logs, Weyerhaeuser, Plum Creek, those big landowners, the majority of those logs, they ship overseas to China. So not only do we subsidize them, they aren't even job givers. They bypass our local mills. You know, the states of Washington and California have a harvest tax, and that money goes to the counties. Here, we have a harvest tax, and that money goes to a lobbying group for the timber industry. None of it goes to the counties. So we just really need to fix up our tax situation, not for you and I, but for the big guys, and have them pay their fair share, and we can thank these people that are sitting up in the trees right now in White Castle. This White Castle timber sale is a sale that's 110 years old. It's never been logged. It's a native forest. It's gorgeous. It's set aside as critical habitat for the northern spotted owl. It's incredibly important wildlife. And so what are they going to do? Clear cut it and call it ecoforestry. I can't even wrap my mind around that hardly. So I better quit.
Thank you, Frances. I really want to emphasize what she was saying about taxes and the irony to me that all the rest of us have to pay and the big corporate timber industry doesn't. And I just learned something last week I thought I would share in addition to what Frances was saying about the harvest tax and their property taxes and how they're much less than the rest of us have to pay, yet the rest of us are so impacted by them, and I am in particular as a family farmer. But I learned, I've been watching log trucks go up and down my road every 10 minutes over the last 4 or 5 years, including BLM harvest going on. But most of what I've been seeing is private log trucks. So I called the county to ask them about road maintenance because the road was getting very torn up by the log haul and the equipment that they hauled up that replaces jobs. Because that's why they have to clear cut, is they have to bring this big, their big pieces of equipment up there and do an efficient job because they want to use the equipment instead of people. Anyway, so they bring all this big equipment up on their trucks and they haul the logs and it's torn up the road. No surprise, right? Who pays for that? Anybody know? And this is interesting to me because people don't understand how much the timber industry is subsidized. And I don't call that sustainable. When the government subsidizes a big wealthy corporation, is it really sustainable for us, for the rest of us who get to deal with the harm and the impacts? Anyway, what I found is clear-cutting places like White Castle. That's what pays for county road maintenance for the private haul. So timber companies don't have to pay for road maintenance on county roads. Isn't that nice? Wouldn't you love to have that low of overhead to be able to get rich? So there is a lot to learn about taxes and subsidies and how real fair or not fair this is. And so I really encourage people to do that because I hear a lot of questions. A lot of people are concerned, but they don't understand how this all works in terms of how the timber industry is subsidized. And so it will help all of us to learn more and to put that in the papers and opinion articles. So now I'd like to invite Kevin Matthews here to speak.